merdeka. Good morning to all participants. We will start our event in a minute. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi dan salam sejahtera. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. His Excellency Bapak Suhasil Nazara, Vice Minister of Finance of Republic of Indonesia, ladies and gentlemen, the honorable speakers, distinguished guests, Echelon 1 official, government representatives, and all webinar participants, good morning to all of you. My name is Ida Ayu Pratiwi. It is my pleasure to extend the warmest welcome and thank you for joining us in the international webinar, Designing the Optimum Ecosystem of Pension. I hope you are doing well amidst all the challenges and changes during this pandemic. This webinar is organized by the Ministry of Finance of Republic of Indonesia and is part of event to commemorate the 74th Indonesian Uang Day. The webinar will be conducted for 2 days, convene policymakers, leading economists, academics, and pension specialists who will share their experience and insight to define strategic input for the Indonesian government and related authorities in starting the pension system reform agenda. We can inform you that today's webinar are attended by more than 1,700 participants registered from both national and international to discuss on this issue. Before we start this event, we will listen to the national anthem, Indonesia Raya.
Indonesia Raya, merdeka, merdeka, tanahku negeriku yang kucinta. Indonesia Raya, merdeka, merdeka, hiduplah Indonesia Raya. Indonesia Raya, merdeka, merdeka, tanahku negeriku yang kucinta. Indonesia Raya, merdeka, merdeka, hiduplah Indonesia Raya.
Ladies and gentlemen, to have a good session, I will explain rules of today's event. First, Zoom meeting will be locked at 9:30 a.m. Jakarta time or once the capacity is full. And second, if you have a question, please write your question in English or in Bahasa on chat feature on Zoom application or live chat on YouTube. Kindly state your name, institution, and whom the question is for, and the moderator will read the question to the panelists during the Q&A session. Regarding the term and condition for the e-certificates for Indonesian participants, allow me to explain in Bahasa. Bagi peserta yang belum melakukan registrasi, dimohon untuk melakukan registrasi melalui link yang sudah disediakan, dan e-certifikat akan diberikan kepada peserta yang melakukan registrasi, baik yang bergabung melalui Zoom maupun kanal YouTube Kementerian Keuangan setelah mengisi tautan kuesioner yang akan dibagikan pada seminar hari kedua. Dan panitia berhak untuk tidak memberikan e-sertifikat bagi peserta yang tidak memenuhi ketentuan di atas. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have Bapak Suhasil Nazara, Vice Minister of Finance of Indonesia, to open this webinar and deliver his keynote speech. His Excellency Bapak Suhasil Nazara, time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning to all of you. It is my privilege to appear here at the web seminar of the Designing the Optimum Ecosystem of the Pension. I would like to say hi first to the all the government officials that are here, the staff from the different ministries. I also would like to say good morning to the prominent speakers who will also appear in the seminar this morning. And I also would like to convey the regards from Minister Sri Mulyani, who is supposed to talk to you directly this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, let us start this morning by looking at what we have already been in the last 7-8 months. We are in the middle of the pandemic, the COVID, and actually the pandemic has been hitting our economy, and it's not only Indonesia, but it is also the whole world quite severely. Nobody can expect that after 7-8 months we will be in this kind of situation, and the whole world is affected. And when the whole world is affected, it is really severe for different kind of severity for different countries. The number of COVID positives is still increasing. In Indonesia is also very visible, and for a country like Indonesia, it is even I should say for a country like Indonesia, it's quite not uniform throughout the regions. is different level of effect from one region to another. And in the middle of this, it is important that very our short-term policy guidelines is to protect the people and also to allow the economy to continue to move. So for Indonesia, we have been looking at this issue since the first case in March, and has already revised a lot of our regulation in order for us to be able to cope with the pandemic, increasing the fiscal deficits, increasing our support for social protection, increasing our supports for the micro and small enterprises and also medium enterprises. And we are also looking at what's going to happen to the economy until the end of the year as well as next year's. And in that regard, it is quite it's quite appealing that the COVID-19 at the same time also require us not to lose sight on the medium and long-term issues. We have been looking at since we are doing this working from home, that actually there are a number of efficiencies that the government activities can put in place. Seminar like this during the normal time, or I should say, if it happened last year, it would have happened at a place with some big meeting package, with a lot of snacks, and then maybe even a lunch with travel cost and other associated expenses. This time around, it is conducted through a Zoom meeting like this. And on my Zoom right now, I can see 101 participants. And I think through other social media, means of social media, I believe it's more than 100 participants. Efficiency. It is something that all lines of government is looking for. And then COVID actually told us to do that just like that. All of a sudden, we are all experts in virtual meeting. All of a sudden, web seminar is the way to do things. School from home, lecture from home, and even the other things that were not imaginable last year, we are doing it through the virtually. And of course, that is if we would like to make the best case out of this efficiency, we have to lock those efficiencies into the way we do things. We have efficiency. That kind of efficiency should become parts of our reform. The reform that we should make, we should ensure to stay in our way of conducting our activities. And reform is something that is very important in the period of low and economic pressures like now. Right now, everyone is is experiencing negative economic growth. Only very few countries that still have economic or positive economic growth. The whole world is actually contracting. All countries is actually declining in terms of its size, in terms of its economic growth. In this kind of environment, then what the people is seeking is the country that can put in place medium to long-term growth. Medium to long-term growth that should be achieved by series of structural reform. If a country does not make any effort to improve their structural reform during this time, then that country will remain to continue, or I should say it will be slowing down whenever the rest of the world is moving into positive growth. That country will be left behind. So it is very important that whenever we are in a crisis like this, then reform should be made. The reform that will allow the country to get the medium and long-term prospect of growth. And I think this is the perspective that I would like to put in place before all of you for this today's seminar. The search for pension reform in Indonesia is a search for improving our medium and long-term economic growth. It is not only for today. It is not only for next year's budget. It is a reform that we must put in place because we are in the pandemic, and the way to get out of this pandemic is by putting the structural reform in the economy. Now, pension reform is one of them for several reasons. Of course, number one, pension is very important for labor. It is part of our pension system, is part of our social security. And for a country like Indonesia, where government employees is still very, very important, and the budget is also still very important as part of the expenditures, pension spending of the government is very important. Right now, if we are talking about the pension system in Indonesia, there are at least, there are at least three institutions that are very, very important. One is the PT Taspen for the civil servants pension, PT Asabri for the army, police, and civil servant in the Ministry of Defense, and the Social Security Agency. And on top of that, there are a lot of private sector pension funds that are a lot doing this, offering the pension services. Now, the government alone is the first two, Taspen and PT Asabri. And it is very important that the government pension, later, I hope that the discussion will be able also to touch the reform of the government pension with the perspective of central and local government. Pension is not only the business of the central government, because what the central government is responsible of, also depends on our regulation about the local government. So it is very important. What kind, if we are looking for the optimum system of pension, then we have to discuss that in the form of the central-local government relationship. Another issue why pension is very important in Indonesia is because pension is the source of long-term financing for development. One of reform where Indonesia is very important to get is to deepen our financial system. And of course, pension is one way to deepen our financial sector in Indonesia. And pension as a way for people to save, I think Indonesia, I think it's not yet very common. Given the fact that the economic structure with the informality that is high, it remains a very big question. What is the best pension system in the economy that is highly characterized by the informal sector? How to allow the informal sector to get involved in the pension schemes? Of course, our social security law mandates pension as one of the social security program that needs to be put in place for the labor. But I think there is still a very big challenge for Indonesia to use the pension as a way for our financial deepening. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as coming to the perspective of the social security programs, I think it's also very important to look at the current social security programs and also the recent changes or recent introduction that is put in place by the new law on job creation, or what in Indonesia is commonly called the Omnibus Law, which has just been approved by the Parliament recently, a few weeks ago. There is a new program. The program for, this is the the literal English translation, Lost Job Security Program, which is basically part of it's a new program. It is introduced, and the government will take part on that benefit. And the question is, how is that particular program related to the existing program, and how that is going to improve the labor's welfare, and what does it mean for our pension? Strictly speaking, people can say it's completely different from pension, Pak. Okay, but still it is in the same labor market. It is about the same labor market. So what I'm trying to say here is that when later you discuss about the pension, make sure to have in mind that the pension is an issue of many aspects. Should not be just be very small, in the small corridor of only about pension. It is related even to the local central local relationship. It is related to the financial sector. It is of course related to the labor market that is formal and informal labor market. It is also related to our challenge of, I think everyone here already heard about the aging population of Indonesia. So it is an issue of many aspects. So in that regard, I appreciate the Directorate General of Budget and also the Fiscal Policy Agency for the Ministry of Finance for conducting this international seminar. I see on my list there is Professor Mukul Asyar, one of the prominent name in the social security issues, not only in Southeast Asia, but I think Asia and knows. And Professor Asar knows a lot about Indonesia, even before we introduce the social security law. There is also, I also see Professor Aris Ananta, my professor earlier at the Faculty of Economics, University of Indonesia. And I think the seminar participant will gain a lot from the discussion of prominent speakers in this session. So pension is very important. This international web seminar is very important. I hope that this is going to be helpful for us to refine our policy directions. And most importantly, I think some of you also know that these days we are now in the middle of the selection process of the board of directors of the new board of directors of our social security agency. So I really hope that this seminar will contribute to the knowledge that we can transfer and we can mandate to the new board of directors. Fresh perspectives that the new board of directors of BPJS, actually both in labor and also in health, will have to think about and will have to implement starting next year. So I really hope that the results of this seminar is not only going to become like a proceeding, but it's actually going to become policy directions that we can formulate and we can ask the new BOD of the Social Security Agency to elaborate, to implement, and to be successful at. So thank you very much for the arrangement, and I wish you all fruitful discussions today. Have a very good discussion, and I wish you all stay healthy during this pandemic. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Bapak Suhasil Nasara, for the opening remarks. And now we will start our first day panel discussion. What things are we needed and how do we design an optimum pension system that maintain the level of welfare among generations and also ensure the fiscal sustainability? There will be three panelists who are already joined us to discuss about this topic. Bapak Febrio Kacaribu, Head of Fiscal Policy Agency, Professor Mukul J. Asep from National University of Singapore, and Professor Aris Ananta, President of Asian Population Association. This session will be led by a moderator, Bapak Didi Kusnaini, Director of Harmonization of Budgeting Regulation, Dibagikan Ministry of Finance. He earned his Master Degree of Public Policy in 2009 from Hitotsubashi University, Tokyo, Japan. He was appointed as a Director of Harmonization of Budgeting Regulation, Dibagikan Ministry of Finance since 2018, who is responsible to develop regulations on budgeting, remuneration, and social benefits for health and pension. Bapak Didi Kusnaini, good morning, Pak. And to start the discussion, I hand over this platform to you.
Thank you, TV. Excellencies, Professor Swahasil Nazara, the Vice Minister of Finance, the Republic of Indonesia, distinguished speakers, Dr. Febrio Kacaribu, Professor Mukul Asher, my professor in Tokyo actually, Professor Aris Ananta, also the senior official of Ministry of Finance, Pak Hadianto, Ibu Sumiati, Pak Kunta, Pak Arif, Bu Sita, and also all webinar participants. Very good morning to you all, and thank you very much being here and joining our virtual discussion about Indonesia future. Our future, actually, my future. As Professor Shua mentioned just before, that we, Indonesia, need a structural reform, include social security system to have the long-term or the better long-term economic growth. And right now, Indonesia has also national social security system under BPJS management, both BPJS health and labor, while we have also specific pension program for civil servant under PT Taspen management. And Pak Swa mentioned that we are now reforming the program. On the other hand, we have also some private pension fund provided by some financial institution. So in that purpose, investigating and also developing the better ecosystem of pension system, we conduct this webinar. And our pleasure that today, along with us, we have very prominent speakers. First, Dr. Febrio Kacaribu. We all knew him. He is the head of Fiscal Policy Agency. And prior to serving to Ministry of Finance, he was the head of LPM Macroeconomics and Financial Research. The second speakers will be Professor Mukul Asher. He was faculty member of Department of Economic and now faculty member of Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at National University of Singapore. He has been the consultant and advisor to several governments in Asia on his specialist is on tax policy and pension reform. This morning, he will share his experience, his expertise about the requirement robust of pension system in the middle income countries. Our third speaker is Professor Aris Ananta. He is an economist, demographer with an interdisciplinary perspective and also professor in Faculty of Economic and Business, University of Indonesia. Right now, he is also visiting professor at Center of Advanced Research, University Brunei Darussalam. And now he is in Bandar Seri Begawan. So, and thank you to join us, Prof. And I am Didi. My role today is such a timekeeper, moderating the discussion. Before we let speakers to start presentation, let me give such a role of discussion to all of you that today we have 2 hours discussion and we will start with panel discussion, the presentation of 3 speakers and every speaker has about 20-25 minutes presentation, and then we will use the rest about 40 minutes for discussion. For participants who wants to ask question, there are 2 ways how to express your question. First is to write down the question in the chat room, in the Zoom chat room, or raise hand and ask later on. In the discussion, we will divide. We will give the opportunity first to the written question, and then maybe 3 or 4 interactive question. Okay. Without any further ado, I will invite our first speaker, Dr. Febrio, to deliver a presentation. Pak Febrio will explore some challenges of designing a fair and sustainable pension system in Indonesia. With that, I ask all of participants to give your full attention to Pak Febrio and help me welcoming Pak Febrio to deliver a presentation. Pak Febrio, time is yours.
Thank you, Pak Didik. His Excellency Mr. Suhasil Nazara, Vice Minister of Finance Indonesia, the Honorable Professor Mukul Asher from National University of Singapore. Good to meet you, sir. The Honorable Professor Aris Ananta, my professor back at University of Indonesia. Very good to see you, Professor. And of course, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning to you all. My great pleasure to be here with all of you for this very important seminar. The topic is, of course, of great interest to many stakeholders. I see that we have about 700 people joining us, either here on Zoom or also online through YouTube. So this is very interesting, very important for many of us, especially also for policymakers. I will start with a very broad picture of story about the aging population, which is currently the main problem in developed countries. Developing countries, including Indonesia, is also, or more precisely, will experience it too. Even though Indonesia is predicted to still have demographic dividend, this means the dependency ratio to the productive age is at its lowest point. That will be in 2030. Indonesia will not be able to enjoy this space forever, right? The aging population era will eventually occur in developing countries, including Indonesia. The other two distinguished professors, I think, will be able to explain more on that later. In developing countries, ladies and gentlemen, the proportion of older people, this is 65 plus, is predicted to increase more than double. And the old age dependency ratio is also expected to increase. In Indonesia, for example, fertility rate is declining, while life expectancy, which is a good news, is improving. We are having better health. As a result, Indonesia's age structure gradually shifting towards higher age groups. As the number of elderly people continues to increase, Indonesia will have to take bolder steps to ensure that their quality of life is maintained. This is an urgency because this will be caused by elderly people have higher incidence of disability prevalence. So it is necessary to pay more attention to their well-being. Elderly people also have significant risk to fall into poverty. So that's another problem and another thing to really pay attention to. And at least in Indonesia, most of them living with their children and grandchildren under one roof. In many developed countries, this is probably not the case, but in developing countries, including Indonesia, most of the elderly living with their children and grandchildren. Also, every 1 out of 4 elderly people have health problems. Although the percentage of health problems for elderly people has a decreasing trend, but still it shows the probability of living longer. So that greater attention is need to be given to its quality of life, because that means that we will need to take care of our elderly. Now, looking at various problems that Indonesia can deal with, its aging population and increasing health risks for elderly people, we need a just and sustainable pension system. This is very essential to ensure that our elderly population's welfare to be always guaranteed. Pension funds serves as a retirement income. This will have 2 primary purposes. Excuse me. Consumption smoothing is the first one, which is the adaptation from work to pension. So how do we manage people's spending from the time that they are still working to the time that they are no longer working? So pension fund is helping this transition. This is what we call consumption smoothing. Second, it is also serving as an insurance for protection against the risk of poverty at the retirement age. Now, there are other purposes of pensions, of course, welfare redistribution, creating a good labor market. In many developed economies, this is to be the case, where a good pension fund help the labor market to be much more flexible and of course good for the economy. And clearly it will support the economic growth. Now, His Excellency Vice Minister also mentioned about financial deepening, which is also one of the big contribution from this pension fund when we have a big and sustainable pension fund. Now, a well-designed pension programs always seeks to find the equilibrium between some of these 3 indicators. So this is from the World Bank pension conceptual framework, from the paper from the World Bank. The first one is it affordable? Affordability in financing, which does not burden employers who bear pension contributions. So in Indonesia, that's to be the case still. And the second one is the benefit adequate? What is the replacement ratio? Replacement ratio means the benefit as a percentage of the last salary to the employee. So this means that when we talk about that consumption smoothing, it is really smooth. It does. We don't want people to, when they are working, they still have a very good lifestyle, and then suddenly when they retire, they don't have enough income, they don't have enough money, so they can't maintain their lifestyle so smoothly. So this is exactly what we mean by that. And of course, the third is the the most important thing that we're talking about today is the program is going to be sustainable. So those are the 3 important things to consider. The role of pension programs is very important, as we explained before. Multi-pillar system needs to be designed to ensure an equitable and broader pension benefit for the members of our society. Here we see an example of some system in a multipolar system introduced by World Bank, for example. Pillar 0 is intended to provide social assistance mostly. And the first pillar was designed to provide a basic income. Government funds, both of Pillar 0 and Pillar 1, coming from tax revenue. However, it is necessary for a country to provide basic income security for its people. Indonesia has not had its first pillar yet. So this is the thing that we don't have in Indonesia yet. The second pillar uses a concept of a mandatory contributory scheme. And this serves as a future income replacement for the retirees. And then lastly, using a voluntary scheme, the third pillar, which is intended for an extra income replacement for the retirees. Indonesia, we have had this second pillar since 1966, started by the creation of a pension fund program for the military retirees. So Pak Wamen also mentioned about this earlier. It was then followed by a pension program for civil servants, an old age savings program, a voluntary pension, and a mandatory pension program. This has been there for decades, but clearly we still have many challenges for this pillar. First, the amount of pension benefits in the public and private sectors is, we consider, still very insufficient, considering that most retirees have not really received the so-called minimum benefits expected by the standard of ILO, International Labor Organization, which is at 40% of the last salary. So this is still not met in our case. As a form of retirement protection, Indonesia's current pension system, of course, has somewhat provide security for Indonesian workers, especially since the SJSN laws enactment back in 2004. So this is already progressing in the right direction. However, the law is not followed by regulations, not yet, and situation which provide adequate benefits as expected. Some people will argue that it instead creates losses for many parties, both for employees and also employers. And even, of course, at the end of the day, for the economy overall. The existing pension system still faces several major challenges. I would like to highlight 4 of them here. First, the recent program could only capture formal workers. The mandatory social security programs, which is pension and old age savings, jaminan hari tua, covers only the formal workers. Even then, it only covers 37% of our formal workers. So that means that is only 16% of our workers. On the other hand, almost all informal workers, which account about 60% of our workers in Indonesia, are not covered by any retirement income protection program. Significant portion of these informal workers within labor market is considered both as big challenge for us, of course, but on the other hand, we should also see this as opportunity. That means that we need to expand. Expansion of coverage and benefits to accommodate informal workers would be our most significant homework. So that's the first one. The second issue I would like to highlight is that the pension fund contribution to the economy is still very small. So this is the part when Pak Wamen, Vice Minister, mentioned about the financial deepening of our financial market. The total asset under management in all pension programs at the moment is only at about 5.6% of our GDP. We always like to consider and to compare this with our neighboring country, Malaysia, which who already had 65% of GDP. So that is a very far compared to what we have for our big country. Currently, the status quo, based on the business as usual projection, we are projecting that by 2045, our total pension fund assets will reach only 13% of our GDP. That is already 2045, which is quite far, quite long time from today. So that is another issue, big issue. The third one I would like to also highlight about the inadequacy and also inequality of the pension benefit. For example, in the pension programs for the civil servant. So I'm using this as an example. The philosophy behind the pension program for civil servant is clearly to provide a decent living during retirement. And we also, as Indonesian people, we like to say that we would like to award the services that they've delivered during their working age. Current design, though, however, is not in line with that philosophy. The benefits or the replacement ratio is very low, even lower for higher rank position. The formula uses basic salary, which is only a small portion of the total take-home pay, and applies inappropriate living adjustments cost. So we need to do these adjustments. We need to think about the design, how to do these adjustments to provide better benefits, maybe using take-home pay as the basis for the calculation instead of the basic salary, which is in Indonesia, everybody here, I think, familiar with the system. Also, we need to decide better financing schemes. And of course, we should always try to compare with what other countries have been doing at the international best practice of the pension system. Now, the fourth one, I would like to also highlight the whole pension system itself, which is not really yet harmonized in terms of design. There is a unpleasant fact that within the formal workers, the program enforcement is relatively low, as there is only less than 40% of formal workers who have this protection actually. The low level of compliance by the employers in the private sector is could be due to the incriminating labor regulations, particularly the severance payment program. According to ILO report back in 2015, labor regulation in Indonesia are one of among the most restrictive in Asia. Legal-wise, Indonesia has the best protection. However, in reality, it is one of the not so good, since most employers do not really comply with the regulations. Meanwhile, this disharmony also has an impact on voluntary pension fund industry, which is actually good news. We have a voluntary pension fund industry which is already emerging, but the growth of this voluntary pension fund shows a very significant slowdown. In 2018, the data that we recently had, the industry of this voluntary pension fund industry grew only at 3%. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, those are some ideas that we would like to share, and we would like to have discussions with other distinguished panelists today. The aging trend has forced us, Indonesia, to rethink about our pension system. Pension reform is urgently needed. The sooner, the better. To have a sound system, design, governance, transparency, asset allocation strategy, these are all very essential. And then we need to think about this one by one very carefully. Regulations need to be strengthened, refined to meet a more harmonious ecosystem. Informality landscape on Indonesian workers, labor market, and also other major challenges, like I mentioned, coverage, replacement rate, and asset liability management. We need to think about those. This is where I stop. I hope we could learn a lot from the pension system reform and ideas around possible policy changes that will be possible. Clearly, as Vice Minister mentioned, this is a COVID-19 pandemic crisis that we are facing nowadays. But we know and we can see how having a good and complete reform would actually bring us stronger coming out of this crisis. And clearly during the crisis, it is a very good moment for us to see what we have, what we don't have. And clearly we wish we had a better system. Hence, during a crisis period, good pension system, good social security system in general would actually serve as, to some extent, automatic stabilizer in terms of maintaining people's welfare, especially during hard times like 2020. Thank you very much for listening. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Big applause for Pak Febrio. Thank you, Pak Febrio. Exactly 20 minutes. And Pak Febrio has already very clear explained what we need, Indonesia need, and what the challenges of reforming the pensions in Indonesia are. If I make such a summarize, first is Pak Febrio mentioned about the need to design a balanced pension system between sustainability, affordability, and adequacy. The second challenge is how to increase the contribution of pension industry or pension system to the economy, because right now it is very small contribution. The third one is lower replacement ratio, especially for the civil servant. And the fourth one, that we Indonesia need to harmonize among the program, include what is the include to harmonize the regulation, then the coverage, replacement ratio, and how to manage the asset properly. I believe that all participants has the question, so just write down in the chat room, and we will read it later on after the presentation complete. And after we listen Pak Febrio's presentation regarding the Indonesian condition challenges, then now we invite Professor Mukul Asher to deliver a presentation. We we will listen about the international experience, how to design the pension system robustly in middle income country. Professor Asher, time is yours. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Hello.
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Selamat pagi. Terima kasih. Vice Minister of Finance, Suhasil Nazara. I appreciate your kind comments. My fellow panelists, and it is always good to have a former student as a moderator. And I very much remember you did it from our interactions earlier. I thank the organizers for inviting me in this webinar. I've already learned a lot from the first presentations. The topic that has been assigned to me is requirements for a robust pension system in middle income countries. Indonesia, most ASEAN countries, Asian countries are middle income. So my remarks, while they are directed at middle income countries, there is a lot of application in a context specific way of what I'm going to be saying to Indonesia and other countries. I'll make some introductory remarks and then discuss demographic trends and implications, requirements of a robust pension system, and some concluding remarks. Now, when we talk about a robust pension system, the public policy goal should be to facilitate aging with dignity. And I think this is a historical goal that we are now in a position to fulfill. A pension system comprises several integrated schemes, as both the earlier speakers have indicated. To measure total impact, they should be evaluated and viewed in a systemic way and not as isolated schemes. And this is what happens in many pension reforms, that individual schemes are emphasized rather than thinking of a systemic view. It implies that a person should be aging in place. And this is something that in Asia, there is a lot of emphasis on, that aging in place is the should be the public policy goal. Staying at home to the maximum number of years as possible. Of course, at some stage, it is not possible and institutional care is needed, and there should be facilities for that. They should have access to a bundle of services needed in old age, especially affordable and accessible healthcare. In many families, healthcare worries and concerns are even more acute than any other. Now, what does robust mean? I've used robust. Robust is meant to convey the following: that pension system is embedded in a reasonably stable economic, regulatory, and macroeconomic environment. Some of these are mentioned. And when economic or other shocks, such as COVID-19 pandemic occur, there is enough flexibility to undertake short-run social assistance program on an adequate basis. So there should be capacity to identify the beneficiaries, what they need, and to deliver them very quickly, like in the pandemic. That's the first. Second part of the robustness is that there should be reasonable trade-offs given a country's socio-economic context between longevity, inflation, and survivor's risk. We all know we are going to die, but we don't know when and how. So we don't want money to be run out before the people die. So we need to plan for that. Inflation is that you get certain pension at a when you retire, but if it is not adjusted as it was mentioned for the civil service in Indonesia, if it is not adjusted for inflation, then the real value goes down and it becomes less and less. And survivors risks, because in particularly the Asian middle income countries, the participation of women in labor force is relatively lower than men, and they get on the average less wages than men. So there should be a scheme where the women and children are taken care of. Even in the United States, more than 1/3 of Social Security benefits go to women and children. Third, there are context specific trade offs between adequacy of benefits, individual, employer, and fiscal affordability, type of risks that are covered, and coverage of the pension system as a whole. Large differences, as was pointed out, uh, in these areas between different occupations and groups need to be minimized. The pension system should be perceived as fair, and the fairness attribute should not be underemphasized, because the perception of fairness do matter also, as we know from the tax system, they matter for compliance as well. If there is a perception of fairness about the pension system, compliance could be improved easily, in an easier way than otherwise. Okay. Now, what is the focus of the pension system should be? The focus should be on household welfare and accessible bundle of services needed by the elderly. Elderly do not want some money, as, as Nicholas Barr pointed out. What they need is a bundle of services that are useful to them. Each society has the bundle of services that are needed in its current context, and that will change over time as the techniques change, and be prepared to change as demographic and expectations change. What should be the aim? To enable purchases of bundle of goods and services and assets on a life cycle basis. COVID-19 pandemic has underlined the importance healthcare system for economic and national security. So now the integrated approach to pension healthcare has become essential. Indonesia has done so much progress and very impressive progress on the healthcare. But the healthcare is on one side and the pension is on the other side. Every country now, because of COVID-19, will need to see where they can integrate and in what way. What are the demographics has already been explained, so I will just make few remarks. Demographic trends pertain to all the persons in the world and to their characteristics as consumers, workers, savers, and investors. Demographic trends affect income statements and balance sheets in the world for individuals, households, corporations and companies, and government. I won't elaborate on this, but I've given a reference where it is elaborated. So we need to think of demographic in a much broader way than simply what the population and so on numbers are going to be. Policymakers should have access to such demographic research, as well as more traditional demographic research. So what I have suggested here about how the balance sheets are affected, that needs to be researched as well. Constructing a robust pension system is qualitatively a very different challenge when retirement period after institutional retirement age extend to 25 to 35 years, as is the case now in most middle income countries, and that includes Indonesia. In international graphic projections, UN population projection, latest is 2019, are used. But there are wide variations in the numbers depending on the fertility trends, low, medium, high, which is used. Usually medium variation is used, but the probability that numbers in a specific country may depart from median varied projections should be kept in mind, should be modeled by the policymakers. Fertility trends are very difficult to predict, but pension planning must be done ahead of time. Stress test that is applied in financial sector should be applied to fertility trends as well. The variability applies when projections move from national to province, state, urban, and rural areas, because many of the responsibilities for pension delivery are at a lower level, as was pointed out by the Vice Minister. And we need then to understand how the variability in projections will affect their capacity. This aspect often ignored should be taken into account. So I've just given some graphs. You can see in this graph that a median variant is over here, high variant is over here, and the low variant is over here. So there is a huge gap, and we need to take that into account. With respect to age 70 and plus, where the pension becomes even more important, see the wide variation. And this is by the age groups, and particularly for 65. And so we see a large gap that occurs. Okay, I won't go into the select countries. These are all middle income countries, and you can look at them. Key requirements of the robust pension system. Globally, social security and pension arrangements exhibit wide variety of practices, and no template or a priori best practices can be relevant for diagnosing what measures needed to progress towards a robust pension system in a given country. So a framework is not a blueprint. And the framework requires thinking and context specificity. This is where globally, in many countries, pension reforms have not delivered the kind of results that are desired because that context specificity was not taken into sufficiently taken into account. This increases the need for greater competence in design and implementation of pension policies and initiatives in a context-specific manner. Key requirements for a robust pension system in a middle-income country with significant informal sector, as in Indonesia, may be stated as follows. And COVID-19 has complicated this. Some requirements, such as focusing on bundle of services on a life cycle basis, and taking a systemic rather than ad hoc approach focusing on particular schemes have been mentioned earlier. What are the additional requirements? First, a key requirement often underemphasized is that transition and sequencing issues inherent in any pension reforms efforts which alter existing trade-off must be explicitly addressed. So Indonesia has done a very impressive pension reform and a health reform, SJS and law and so on. But the transition issues and the organizational capacity issues are something that are also needed. Pension and provident services are provided by government organizations. Without organizational change, which is explicitly planned, including in habits and mindsets and skill sets with the organization and its future recruitment practices, progressing towards a more robust pension system becomes difficult. Third, extending Social Security coverage to the heterogeneous groups comprising informal sector requires a variety of complementary and integrated initiatives concerning labor market, social assistance involving in-kind, food packages, transport allowance or assistance, and cash, and others. For this, a good database on informal sector employment and composition of activities are essential. I have been very impressed with Indonesia's database on the informal sector. For societies as well as households need to rely on multiple sources. Now, pension, when you water for pension, it should be from many different wells. And those wells, the World Bank had earlier called it the tier system, which was explained to us. But the different wells in a context-specific way should be mapped out. And a particular pension system does not need to give a full replacement rate. Should come from 7, 8, 10 sources, including using human capital as a bond to earn a bit of income in retirement. 5, the importance of developing government and corporate bond markets, and this was again mentioned, to help provident and pension fund match their longer term assets and liabilities has been underlined by COVID-19 pandemic. And this is why Jamsos Tech, for example, has a long-term liability but short-term assets. The importance of innovation and design of pension products and services needs greater recognition. There are several interesting experiments along these lines, including micro-pension design and delivery in an environment providing long-term retirement saving security and confidence. So those intangibles of confidence and trust are very important. A systemic and integrated approach requires that focus should be on outcomes. And the following question should be asked. Could the desired objective or outcomes be achieved in a different or complementary way than the standard social protection initiatives suggested by ILO or World Bank or others? Example, maternal and child healthcare indicators can be improved in some countries with less pollution creating indoor cooking material. So if this can be improved, as the Indonesian case study that I've cited by Imelda Carlos, 2020, then we should try to explore that. And I have provided many such examples from my study on India. Concluding remarks. It is clear that progressing towards a robust pension system is a process, not an event. Lot of time, understandably, the policymakers' focus is short run, it's on an event, and when it is done, that longer term focus and energy is not there. So process is important. Sustained focus and data intensive monitoring and evaluation. In fiscal policy, we talk about M&E system, how difficult it is to put that together. Same thing is needed in pension. Preferably not just at central, but at level. In this context, each middle income country is urged to consider setting up a semi-autonomous center of retirement research or its equivalent with expertise in large data analytics and policy research. Today's computing and digitization allows us to do large data analytics, and it has not been used sufficiently for pension in middle income countries. Similarly, for the health area. COVID-19 pandemic has led to the realization of the importance of relevant data on labor force, including for informal sector, internal migration trends, and composition. So, process of progressing robust pension system is challenging in the current environment. It requires a well-executed departure from business as usual. Change in the purpose of pension and provident fund organizations, shifting from process to outcome orientation and from welfare orientation to professionalism. Change in the habits and mindset of stakeholders, including of officials of provident and pension fund organizations, as well as their trustees or board of governors, and of members, all of whom will need to exhibit greater financial literacy. This is an area deserving much greater attention of the policymakers and regulators. I have talked to a lot of trust board of governors of many provident fund, pension funds, and so on, and I have been struck by the possibility that their financial literacy at that level could be improved substantially. There is to more effectively and competently leverage, there is room for more effectively and competently leveraging emerges for record keeping, lowering of administrative and compliance cost, and lowering of investment management costs. The incentive structures of the provident and pension fund organizations, the officials and the members to behave in a manner consistent with their fiduciary responsibility and to enhance transparency and accountability. Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Professor Asher. Well, it's very enlightened us, and also underlining what Pak Febrio mentioned before. Professor Asher, I remember your lecture about 12 years ago. Your warning actually that be careful if you want to change on or reform the pension system, because it will somewhat hurt the fiscal position. And I think today you also warn us about, give warning to us about the transition. For the key requirement, the first key requirement, you said that the transition and sequence is the first key requirement, and other 6 requirement. I mean, I think all of us has already listened the explanation, the sharing from Professor Asher. And in the 7 key requirement, it's also another wording that a systemic and integrated approach requires that the focus should be on outcomes, and that is following question that could be desired objective outcomes be achieved in a different or complementary way than the standard social protection initiative. It needs, I think, the more innovative ways to develop the pension system. Thank you, Professor Asher, for the sharing the expertise and experience on the middle income countries. And I think we will have the many questions later on. Yeah, I saw the many questions already in the chat room, but let the third speakers give us presentation, give us lecture presentation. I invite Professor Aris Ananta to deliver a presentation, and it's about the how to develop the financially just and equitable pension system. Professor Aris, time is yours.
Terima kasih. Thank you, Pak Moderator. Thank you very much for Ministry of Finance for inviting me to share my ideas and how to reform the pension system. My appreciation also goes to my friends, Prof. Mukul Asser in Singapore. He is the guru of social protection system. My friend in Thailand, Professor Warawet, who has been working a lot academically on the social protection system, and my friend in Iran, Dr. Azimi, who has been a practitioner in pension in Iran. Well, thank you for all participants. I have been learning a lot from the presentation of Pak Swahasil, Pak Febrio, and Pak Mukul Asser. That's very interesting and very good. And I think what my presentation will be similar to them, but I will just present in a different framework. Well, reforming a pension system needs time. It is not one night program. It should start from the younger generation. And that is why my presentation will be beneficial mainly for the younger generation, not people of my generation. So this will be more important for the generation of Pak Swahasil, Pak Febrio, and their younger brothers and sisters. In 2045, who are the older people? They are the current young population, 35 years old and over. In 2045, when Indonesia celebrates the 100th anniversary of the independence. Next. This is the question we have been facing. Mukul also mentioned, everybody will eventually become old with worsening health, or health will be worsening, and our marketable scale will be depreciating. That means we will have increasing expenditure, especially increasing health expenditure. But we will have declining income and sometimes no income. The question is, how should older people finance their journey in later life before they die? By themselves, support from family and relatives, support from communities, or assistance from the government? Do they have financial adequacy with the support from many parts? Or how can they have dignified journeys? Next. The deeper question is, what kind of life should the older person have? What kind of life do people want? Not only during the old age, but the whole life. The deeper question is, what is the purpose of life? What do we want to have in life? Next. Well, that is a very philosophical question, and I will not deal with that. In this presentation, I will only talk about a simple one. First, financial sustainability for the state budget, efficiency of the market, especially labor market, and social justice for the society, including the older people. we talk about pension system, we have to talk these three things, at least these three things together, and must fulfill these three things together. Financial sustainability for the state budget. The state budget should have the money to fund the program, and it should be sustainable, not only in 1 year, 2 years, but on the long run. And we have to talk about efficiency of the market. The market should be efficient, including the labor market. And don't forget about social justice for the society, including the older people. And I like to give some ideas how to put these three things together. Next. This is my conceptual framework. We have a competitive market in the middle. With the competitive market, that is a market which is not monopoly, not oligopoly, free competition, many buyers, many sellers. With competitive market, then we will produce efficient allocation of good services. We will also have state financial sustainability on the pension. But competitive market does not necessarily produce social justice. Therefore, to have a social justice, we should talk about initial endowment. When the initial endowment of the people is just, then the competitive process will create social justice too. So my framework is that we have to start with a just initial endowment, then go with the competitive market, then we will have efficiency, state financial sustainability, and social justice. What is social justice? There are so many definitions and controversy of social justice, but here I only choose two approaches. The John Rawls approach in 1971, which emphasized on the worst off in society, and Amartya Sen in 2009 publication on the capability approach, especially on minimizing capability deprivation when people are deprived from the capability to work, from independence to work. Next. So again, this is the three important features of pension system which we shouldn't forget: state financial sustainability, efficiency, and social justice. Next. Slideshow. Yeah, now we talk about state financial sustainability, the first feature of pension reform. Okay, next. In many rich countries, pension is a reward. They got the reward because they have been working very hard when they are young. Now they got the reward. They don't have to worry about financial issues because everything will be paid by the government. Retirees in the rich country are able to maintain their lifestyle. The pension is very attractive, partly because they live in rich country. The pension is paid from tax by the working population, the younger one. But if the pension is paid according to the income while working, should the poor continue to be poor in the remaining of their life? Next. The issue is that in the rich country, there is a shrinking percentage of tax-paying population and rising percentage of pension recipients. So they say that there will be no financial sustainability because the taxpayer is shrinking in numbers and percentage, but the recipient is rising. So how could they pay it? So they are very afraid about financial uncertainty. There will be no financial sustainability. But this worry depends on the assumption that the working age population cannot increase the productivity. Actually, if the number of working age is declining, but productivity is rising, the contribution will be a lot more too. Especially with the digital technology, we could increase the productivity of the working age population. So we don't have to worry about a deficit. Another assumption is that older people cannot contribute to the economy. But there are many older people who actually can still work and contribute to the economy. So the issue in the rich country of absence of financial sustainability because of the shrinking percentage of tax-paying population may not be necessarily true. If they could increase productivity, if the older people can contribute to the economy. Next. How about in developing country? In developing country, retirement is punishment, not a reward, because they may be still able to work. They may still want to work. Why they want to work? Because if they got pension, the pension is very meager, not adequate for their life. They want to work, but so they want money to support themselves, but they are not allowed to continue working because of their ages. So retirement or pension is a punishment. They want to work, they need money to work, but they are not allowed to work. So this is a punishment. So in economic term, not allowing people who are able to work and can work and want to work is actually a waste of resources. And it is also against human rights. Many developing countries do not have attractive state pension system. If they do, the payout may be eager. People need to continue working to support themselves. Next. However, we also have a financially sustainable state budget that is a defined contribution pension system. In this defined contribution pension system, people save some of their earning to the government. The employees add something to the saving. This collected saving is invested by the government. The accumulated and invested money from the saving is then used to provide payout during the retirement years. Here is sustainable. Why? Because the government does not contribute any money. It does not burden the taxpayer either. So from the state budget point of view, this is financially sustainable. Next. But the question is, how much is the payout? Is it adequate? How can the government invest the money profitably and return the money to the retirees? People will ask, can the government invest my money better than what I do? Especially the younger generation who are smart on financial market, they will question, how good the government can invest my money rather than my ability to invest my own. So the question here is that the government must be able to invest the money profitably, must be better than what the private sector can do and the individual can do. And the money returned to the retirees. This ability to invest profitably determines how much payout the retirees will receive. However, the poor may be left out because why? The poor contribute little and the money invested is not much. So when they retire, they will receive small amount of money too. As mentioned by Prof. Asher too, high inflation may erode the return from investment. Next. Next, we talk about the second feature, efficiency. Next. Any competitive market will result in efficient allocation of goods and services. This is theory in microeconomics, everybody knows. There is no government intervention, free exit, free entry, complete information, many buyers and many sellers, and assuming no externalities in public goods or public debt. Next is that any initial endowment will produce efficient output if we have competitive markets. This is a general theory in welfare. The policy implication is that we have to reduce monopoly and oligopoly, reduce regulation, and let the market works by itself. It produces efficient allocation of goods and services. Next. However, the competitive market does not produce what we desire. If we have market failure, that is, if we have existence of externalities, we talk about public goods, public bets, and asymmetric information. Another issue is that initial endowment. The initial endowment also affects the perception of desirability of the efficient allocation. Then here the government must intervene the market. Next. So if we have a just initial endowment, then we let the competitive market work. we will have a just and efficient market output. The question is how to make a just initial endowment distribution. Next. Next, we talk about social justice. We don't talk about legal justice, but social justice. Next, how to create social justice. There are many definitions of social justice. Social justice often deals with perception. We cannot eliminate social injustice, but we can reduce it. Here, we use two approaches to reduce social injustice: John Rawls' theory and Amartya Sen's theory. Next. This is what John Rawls in 1971 taught: justice as fairness, as also mentioned by Professor Asher. And he gave priority is given to the worst off part of the society. That is what is called fair by Rawls. And Amartya Sen in 2009 in the book Idea of Justice, talking about capability approach, enhancing people capability and minimizing people capability deprivation. I will talk about the two in more detail. Next. How about the application of John Rawls theorem? The worst off, what is the indicator of worst off? We can use poverty rate, we can use half or median income, or others. So we could talk about poverty rates, not poverty rate. So people who have the race to be poor. There can be many indicators we can discuss what is the worst off part of the society. But John Rawls emphasized on helping the worst off in the society. Next. For example, subsistence support to the worst off in the society, including all older people. Free premium for health insurance to the worst off in the society, including all older people. This is example of the application of John Rawls theory. Next. Now is the application of Amartya Sen. This is more difficult to explain. The concept of capability deprivation is that people are often deprived of some capability. I have eyeglass that is to minimize my visual capability. People use hearing aid to minimize that capability in hearing. People use some helps to walk, wheelchair, so that minimize their capability deprivation. People have hypertension, blood pressure, cancer, and so on. Their capability is deprived. So how can we minimize their capability deprivation? By minimizing capability deprivation, we will increase income for everybody, not for older person, but also older person. We are talking about life cost approach from the embryos until people die. So when people are healthy, we could minimize their capability deprivation. Their income will increase until they are old. This also will reduce the health expenditure for everybody, especially in older people. Some example of the program is healthy and smart lifestyle, older people friendly transportation, and affordable and reliable public infrastructure. Next. Healthy and smart lifestyle is an example of application of Amartya Sen approach of minimizing capability deprivation, such as what? Such as provide healthy, affordable, and delicious food. Sometimes people make a trade-off. Do you want healthy food or delicious food? We shouldn't make that trade-off. We should be able to provide healthy, affordable, and delicious food. The business can try to promote this, healthy, affordable, and delicious. And this kind of food should be available in its families, public spaces, institutions such as office and school. We often see canteen in the institution. Sometimes the canteen do not provide healthy food. So this should be done. And then we have provide facilities to do exercise even at the office. Yeah, I just heard that Ministry of Finance provide these facilities. This is very good one. Provide facilities to breathe fresh air even at office. and provide assistance to upgrade marketable skill, especially related to digital technology. When we upgrade marketable skill, it's not only for the young one, but also for the people aged 40, 50, and even older. Sometimes we give fellowship only to the younger generation because of the narrow rate of return formula. The younger generation live longer, so if we invest on the younger generation, the rate of return is higher. But if we invest in people at age 50, they will die soon, so that the rate of return is short, is smaller. So I don't think we have to continue that way of thinking, because if we don't care about people aged 40 and 50, they will become burden when they become old. But if we care about them when they are old, they will be still productive and they could help the economy as a whole. Next. Is older people friendly public transportation. This help older people mobility on their own. Create walkability, we forget about that. Walkability, safe and accessible sidewalk. There is places to take rest. So everybody, including older people and younger people, can walk and make a safe zebra cross and disabled-friendly pedestrian bridge. This is good not only for older people, but good for environment, good for people health. It will have less motorized traffic, and this is disabled-friendly. So this is one way to minimize capability deprivation, which can improve people productivity and income and reduce health expenditure. Another way is that create safe and accessible disabled-friendly public transportation. We may feel that we are not disabled, but sometimes we are partially disabled. So we need friendly public transportation. In 2045, people who are 35 years and over are already older people. They are hopefully they are not disabled, but they need more older people friendly public transportation. Next. Affordable public infrastructure. This help older people human capital. Reliable internet and its accessories. We are now living in the digital world. Internet become one of the basic needs of human being. So we have to provide reliable internet and its accessory for everybody, including older people. Can we teach the older people to use internet better? And we have to provide safe and clean water, electricity. Electricity become very important in the digital world. Without electricity, we cannot do anything. Clean air. And we have to build natural disaster-resistant building home. This will minimize capability deprivation and even promote capability of people. Next. Next, this is the recommendation from the three things we discussed from the this is the recommendation from the three things about financial sustainability, efficiency, and social justice. I will give some recommendation for any country on Indonesia. Next. On state financial sustainability, the best one for financial sustainability is state-defined contribution pension system. With the state-defined contribution pension system, we could maximize the rate of return above inflation rate and above what the private sector can do it, above what individual can do to invest their money. Yeah, the rate of return must be competitive with the market. Otherwise, individual may say, I can do better than you, the government. Yeah, so they have to, the return must be better than the market, better than what individual can do. And then there is no cut on employers' contribution as people age. In some countries, employers' contribution is becoming lower when people getting older. So it is a punishment for people who get older. So there should be no cut. No maximum on total contribution to the saving. In some countries, there is a maximum for the total contribution. We shouldn't put the maximum. Whatever people can contribute, it will be better for them. Return all the net outcome of the accumulated investment to the retiree. So this is for the retiree. Return all the net outcome of the accumulated investment to the retiree, and must be transparent how to use the money. Next. Another issue of state financial sustainability is promote philanthropic contribution. There are a lot of people who like to donate to the society. So the philanthropic contribution should be tax deductible and provide non-monetary reward to those who have not for-profit job, especially to help older people. If we could encourage this is happening, this will help state financial sustainability because not everything is from the government, but from the society too. Next. Efficiency. We have to create competitive labor market. Optimal retirement age should be at 70 and should be optional. People may want to retire, people may still continue to work. Reward and punishment are according to productivity, not by age and gender. A low and compulsory retirement age is a sign of inefficiency and against human rights. So I think we could design at 70, people can have optional retirement. They want to retire, they want to get the payout, they can. But if they like to postpone getting the payout, they can too. And so if a young man is very productive, he should get promoted. If an older woman is very productive, they should be promoted too. But if a young man or old women are not productive, yeah, they should be punished. So created competitive labor market like this will reduce monopolistic and oligopolistic labor market and provide more labor market information. This will make a better labor market. Next. We have to use digital technology to widen productive employment, including older people friendly employment. We have to tell the business sector that, okay, now there are more older people friendly, how can we utilize them? And we create older people friendly employment. With the pandemic, we know that many people can work from home. So this will enable older people to join more on the labor market. The disabled can also join more because they don't have to go far to the office. We could also promote how to create passive income. For example, from business, the older people do not have to routinely deal with it. When older people do the business and the business is going well and the older people doesn't have to work at the business every day, it can be continued by the children and so on. This can also be source of income. And next is that we have to develop reliable private pension insurance. This is very important to develop reliable private pension insurance. For those who have the money, they could rely on the private pension. This will reduce the burden of the government. Next. Social justice. It can be efficient, it can be financially sustainable by the government, but it may not create social justice. So we have to think about this one too. The initial endowment must be that which is a just initial endowment. So we provide subsistence assistance for the worst off in the society and all other people. We provide free premium for health insurance for the worst off and all older people. Provide free skill upgrading for the worst off and older people, especially on digital technology. The worst off can be measured with poverty rate, half median income, poverty risk level, or others. This can be negotiated. As the economy is progressing, is richer, maybe the payment for what we call worst off is rising too. Next. Amartya Sen, the capability approach. People with capability deprivation face higher living costs than people without capability deprivation. A simple example, if we have visual capability deprivation, we have to buy eyeglass that is cost more. If we have hearing problem, we have to buy hearing aid and it's still expensive today. Therefore, we need to minimize people capability deprivation. Next. Promote people capability since they are still embryos until they die. So this life cost approach suggested by Amartya Sen. So we are not only talking about the people who are currently age 60 or 65 and over, but from people when they are still embryos, how to make it they have a healthy life. Minimize people capability deprivation since they are still in embryos until they die. Example of possible program: healthy and smart lifestyle, older people friendly public private transportation, and affordable and reliable public infrastructure. Next. This is the summary of capability approach. On the left-hand side, this is some example of the program and capability approach. Healthy and smart lifestyle. This is very not only about food, but so many things like improvement in public utility services, older people-friendly public transportation. This will result in longer time to be economically productive. So when people in rich country are worried about budget deficit, if they use capability approach, people can still contribute longer. So the question of deficit may be already answered. Work more, longer, but people in rich country may not be happy to have to postpone retirement age because they have very handsome pension. So why they have to wait to receive the pension? But in a country like Indonesia, the pension is very small. People like to work longer. And with the capability approach, people can continue working well for older ages too, and they have more income. With capability approach, they will be healthier, so there will be less health expenditure. More income and less health expenditure. The two will result that they will less dependent on families, friends, communities, and government. Next. That's the last one, is the takeaway message. Next. This is the essence of my presentation. We use competitive market to make everything become efficient. We reduce monopolistic practice, so that this will result in efficient allocation of goods and services and state financial sustainability. But this competitive market may result in social injustice. To produce social justice, we have to have a just initial endowment. And here, just initial endowment and social justice is approached by the John Rawls theory in 1971 and Sen's capability approach. By this one, competitive market and just initial endowment, we will have an efficient and socially, we have an allocation, we have a pension system which is efficient, state financial sustainability, and social justice. This is the takeaway message from me. And next, I like all of us enjoy our dignified old age. Thank you very much. Terima kasih banyak. Thank you, Pak Moderator.
Yeah. Thank you, Prof. Aris Ananta. Yeah, regarding the just and financially sustainable pension system, now we know from the presentation from Professor Aris that pension system is not as simple as transferring money from say country or what pension fund to elderly people, but more than that, we have also considered about the social justice. So Professor Aris give us the basic thinking of what pension is. Whether in rich country, it is said that pension is such kind of reward, while in the developing countries, sometimes it treated as punishment. So in order to government develop the just and financially sustainable, Professor Aris mention three key key requirement. First is the financially sustainable to the budget of state budget. The second one is the efficiency of the market, especially labor market, and the third one is social justice. The social justice, sometimes we the left behind in the consideration. And the other thing is very interesting, enlighten us, all of us, and I do believe that the participants, all of the participants already have the question, but now time to digest the idea shared by speakers, Pak Febrio, Pak Mukul, and Pak Aris. So right now we start discussion in the session 1, Prof. Aris, Prof. Mukul, and Pak Febrio, but I'm sorry because Pak Febrio is accompanying the Menteri, then the question to Pak Febrio will be answered or will be responded by Pak Kunta, the advisor to Minister for Government Spending. We have in the session 1, we have 3 questions from both YouTube and Zoom chat room. First question from Dias Purwakusuma in the YouTube. The question is addressed to Pak Febrio, so to Pak Kunta. Which one is better scheme for civil servant in Indonesia? Whether defined benefit or defined contribution scheme, considering that Indonesian life expectancy is increasing. I think it's not only to Pak Febrio, but
Pak Ida, teman-teman.
I think it's not only to Pak Febrio, but Prof. Aris also mentioned about the defined contribution system. Which one the better for the civil servant? The second question from Purwakusuma is, in the relation to defined contribution system, if the participant retire during the recession like today, meaning that they return a bit lower than inflation rate, it will create a shortfall or cut on their benefits. Is it possible to postpone the withdrawal until the economic condition goes back to normal, or what? And it's a question from Pak Dias Purwakusuma. The second question to all speakers from Pak Indra Kurba. The pension system should be designed comprehensively and closely linked to resources and remuneration system, meaning that salary system. Do you think the pension system reform in Indonesia has considered all of those related factors, such as the human resources and remuneration, as a whole system of pension fund? And the third question from Farid, from Pak Farid. The question is addressed to all speakers. Our existing regulation for pension fund is already obsolete. That is law number 11 of actually 1969. Without the new regulation, we couldn't step up further. What is the exact plan of the government to tackle such issue? I think that the third question also to Pak Febrio and Pak Kunto. These are the questions in the session 1. Maybe Pak Kunto first can respond the question.
Okay, thank you Pak Didi, and thank you from the speakers. I try to answer the Pak Dias Purwokusumo. Yeah, he asking about the better scheme for the civil servants is the defined benefit or defined contribution scheme. I think this is not only I mean that both of the defined contribution or defined benefit have pros cons. So we need to see the condition itself. I mean that the goal is give more, make the pension on the elder people become healthy. This is the goal. So in our experience with the defined benefits, it means that the issue is about the sustainability of the program. Because if we have a defined benefit, but too higher benefits, something like that, make the sustainability of the program is become riskier. But if, like you mentioned, if the defined contribution is, this is the sustainability has become no issue, but the issue is about the what's called the condition of the economy, and in the case is about the what yet we can have on the we need to have something like pension unit net more affordable, something like that. Yeah, more we agree, we believe with this pension unit, something like that. So this is more about the how we are in the situation when we are choose the defined benefit or defined contribution is about the how we can get when we are in the old ages. So based on that, I think in the case of we have a higher or increasing the pension, the longer we are life. I mean that in the situation is if we want to have a more sustainable program in Indonesia, I think we need to think about the defined contribution. Yeah. Even though maybe in this when we are in the crisis or something like that, we can have something like the limit of or the cap, lower cap of what we can get when we are pension, something 10% or 15% or 20% of our take-home pay, something like that. Yeah. And then the second question about the possibility of the postpone. This is more in here. Maybe it's depend on this scheme, but if you are postpone the benefit when we are in the crisis, it means that we need to thinking about the other situation on the other people that need to it means that they are still have saving or something like that. But if they are not have a saving for to make them have a good life, yeah, this is very difficult to think about that. Itu ya from Mas Dias. For Pak Indra Purba, I agree with Pak Indra Purba that if we want to reform our pension, we need to think globally, yeah. Not only pension if left, but also the remuneration, but also the human resources and the longer life of our civil servant and something like that, of long life of our employer. So based on that, when maybe if we want to reform our pensions, I agree that the remuneration and then the human resources, and like Pak Aris mentioned, we need to think about the pension aid, something like that. We need to think all of this and as the pension ecosystem. And for Farid, about the regulation law number 11 in 1979, I think we have not only in the we have a regulation of pension fund, but when we are right now, we are in the position, we have the law of SCSN law that regulate about the BPJS tenaga kerja. This is the pension in this BPJS tenaga kerja. We have a pension program that already in the law. So we didn't not only regulation number 11, but also we have a HSN law for everybody. And for the civil servant, actually, we already have the ISN law that in this law, we mentioned about the pension. So if we want to reform this pension, I think, I don't know if it's based on this reform yet, but not only the regulation itself, but maybe we can use a lower than the law, like a PP or president decree or everything that can have a reform in Indonesia. I think so. It's been that without new regulation, so yeah, I agree. We couldn't step up further, but we can discuss about the reform first. After that, we can see about the regulation. As now, we need to improving the new regulation or just using the president decree and everything. I think this from me, Pak Didi. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Kunto. Then actually 3 questions not only addresses to Pak Kunto but also to Professor Asher and Professor Aris. So Professor Asher and Professor Aris, could you share any idea regarding the defined contribution? Quite technical, though. Okay. Please, Professor Asher.
Yep. No, I don't have any comments to make, which are very Indonesia specific. And I've already indicated some areas where we could, where the reforms that have been undertaken, which have been impressive, things that they could have considered. For example, the withdrawal age doesn't have to be set with longer life expectancy. So one can withdraw, for example, between age 60 and age and earn the compound rate of interest that would provide the member need from Jamsostek. Or the civil service also could have, PT Tasman could also have that kind of flexibility for the civil service. If they postpone their pension for some years with some limit, then they will get a higher pension, and that kind of database and calculations have to be there. Now, in any DC system, macroeconomic risks arise not only when you are accumulating funds, but importantly, as importantly, when you are in the decumulation phase, when you take out. Now, a lump sum withdrawal is not usually a idea that has worked well in many countries. So some sort of a systemic withdrawal plan or some sort of a risk-sharing, rolling annuity with some risk participation by government are some of the product options that could be considered. The last point is that organizational change and how to make existing organizations more effective is something that, in my view, Indonesia could consider giving greater attention to. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mukul. Professor Aris, actually, the first session's questions contains a question about the defined contribution system, but in the next question, I mean the session 2 questions, there are also some questions regarding defined contribution. So may I just read the question first, and then we can answer the whole question. From Nani Patria, the defined contribution program are growing globally. How will we prepare for this in the future if there is no insurance company provide the annuity product for pensioners? And the next question to Professor Mukul and Professor Aris from Rondi Pramuda. Given limited revenue and different lifestyle or living costs, how to set the optimum contribution so employees would not sacrifice their present need? And the last question from Pak Agung Widyadi, this specific to Professor Aris Ananta, that refer to Professor Aris' presentation on social justice. How we, I mean in Indonesia, can define the minimum level of justice for all citizens or retirees? Can we use the approach of regional minimum wage or UMR as a proxy minimum income for retiree? It is specific to Professor Aris Ananta, but to Professor Asar, there is also questions how to set the optimum contribution. I'm inviting Professor Aris to respond the previous question and also the next question.
Thank you, Pak Didi, and thank you for all the questions. First of all, I would like to mention that the decision on the pension reform does not depend on the financial aspect, does not depend only on the economic aspect, does not depend only on the social aspect, but also on political aspect. So it will involve a lot of negotiation between many group of people, many political interests, and so on, including like how to define the worst off in the society. Yeah, I could say that poverty rate, it could be half of the median income of the people. It could use poverty rates. Poverty rates means that people are not poor, but about their rates to be poor. That can be used. It can be used regional minimum income and so on. It's part of the negotiation of the people and the government and everybody, what is considered as the worst off in the society. About defined contribution and defined benefit, it has a lot of political aspect. In rich country, they are so happy with the current system. They don't have to contribute a lot, but they have a very good pension system. It's a reward. They don't have to work for money, but they are financially adequate. But suddenly now they realize that the number and percentage of older people is rising very quickly, and the number of the working population is decreasing. So they are afraid to have a deficit. But actually, if the younger population work with the new technology, digital technology, they could be much more productive, and their income is much higher, and they are able to support the older person. But the younger population may not be happy. They say, I work hard and the money is for you. This is not fair. Another consideration is that let the older person work, raise the retirement age, so that the working age population is increasing. But the younger population say, no, don't raise the retirement age. Usually I could get my good pension at age 61. Why I have to wait until age 64 or 65? So this is more political question, not from economic and financial issues. From economic and financial issues, increase productivity using digital technology or many others, so that small number of working population is not a problem. Use robotic technology, or let the older people work more, raise the retirement age. But politically, the government in rich country are facing this one in terms of politics. To raise retirement age in rich country is difficult politically. And defined contribution, it is financially sustainable for the government, because the government doesn't have to do anything. This is the money from the people, not from the government. So it is financially sustainable. But the question is, when people are poor, the contribution is also small. So when they are old, the money they get is also not much. That's the issue of the defined contribution. So that's why I said about financial sustainability, efficiency, and social justice. So I recommend a combination of use of defined contribution and defined benefit. The defined contribution is private insurance can also develop that one. The same thing, they save to the private insurance company and they got money when they are retired. Or they put the money to the government. But the requirement is that the government must be able to invest better than the private sector. Otherwise, let the market do it. And now many younger generation knows how to play in the financial market. They will question, why should I put the money with the government and let the government do the investment? Do they know better than I do? So with the defined contribution system, the requirement is that the government must be able to invest much better than the individual or the society. But at the same time, let's develop the private pension system. But how about the poor people? That's a social justice. We have to provide minimum assistance to the worst off part of the society. How much? We have to calculate and subject to negotiation with many parties. The second one is the capability approach, which is wider, intersectoral, which we often forget. So that this one will help people being better able to keep producing, contribute to economy, and less health expenditure. And with the capability approach, we hope in 2045, I will have all older people, which are currently still young, live happily, healthy, and smart, and they don't have to suffer from any health problem before they die. So I think, yeah, so that's my answer. So there is the optimum contribution is also a method to be negotiated between many parts of the society. So there are two. We use the defined contribution and defined benefit. And how much is it is part of the negotiation politically. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Aris. So we have also to consider about the political consideration. Yeah.
Because
Thank
budget is partly politics.
Sure.
We know it. The Minister of Finance provide the budget, but politics, parliament decided. So politics and
Sure.
budget is one.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Aris. So to Professor Asher, do you have any idea for the question how to set the optimum contribution?
Yeah, thank you. The word optimum is somewhat debatable, because we are talking about as Aris already pointed out, there are different considerations here. One is employer. Now, the employer to employer, any contribution which is mandatory is a cost of doing business and cost of hiring. So if you make the contribution too high, then there is an incentive to hire people for whom many countries. If you set it too low, then you affect the adequacy at the end. Too high a contribution, if employers comply, that could affect the competitiveness. And in the era of disruptive technologies, we cannot be sure which companies are going to be there 5-10 years from now, which companies are not going to be there. The final contingent liability is going to be on the state. So that fiscal contingent liability of the contribution rate potential, that should be taken into account. Now take from the employee side. The employee, when they contribute, it reduces their disposable income. So too high a contribution will mean their disposable income is low to borrow, or in an unsatisfactory way, they have to pay higher interest for some liquidity needs for education, health, or whatever, while their money in the provident fund or the pension fund is not earning too much return. So now you have to balance out the employer needs, the probabilities of what effect on the cost of production is this going to be on the life of the company, and on the fiscal contingent liability. You said that, and Aris very rightly pointed out, this is part of the political economy question. And critical thing is to improve regulation, capabilities, organizational effectiveness, develop the financial and capital markets, and then even a lower contribution rate will give better pension than otherwise. So it's a system approach once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Asher, and also to Professor Aris. We are going to finish the discussion, the seminar, the webinar in the 11:45, but we still have two remaining questions from Pak Agung Pambudi of DGSN and from Pak Helmi Satriano, the Chief of Financial Officer of PT Asabri. Special to Pak Aris from Pak Agung Pambudi, how to consolidate the strategy and policy intervention for financial institution ecosystem to optimize the protection for workers when they reach pension age. From Pak Helmi, quite long question, but he has idea that to increase replacement ratio, it is possible to introduce some programs to increase the purchasing power of pensioners. For example, to give discount or special price when the pensioners buy the product or services provided by SOE. So, do you think, Prof. Aris, it is common or can be implemented or applicable? So, sorry, Professor Aris, we still have two remaining question to you.
Okay, thank you. Terima kasih. Okay, thank you. Terima kasih. And Pak Agung about consolidated strategies. Yes, we need to do that. We need to do that. Sometime in many part of the world, when I attend discussion on aging, I am a minority because I am the only economist and sometimes only one or two economists among those people who talk about aging. But when I am talking about pension, I'm also a minority because I'm maybe the few one who talk about non-financial issues. But non-financial issues, as I show, is very related to the financial issues. Capability approach, it seems that it's not related to financial issues, but it is very related to financial issues because it will increase income and reduce expenditure, especially health expenditure. So we need to do more coordination between financial sector, economic sector, social sector, and even political sector to work together to coordinate all of these things, because how much payout we need depends on many things, like life arrangement, with whom they live in the house, the elderly. Do they live with their spouse, with the son, with their daughter, with their in-law, or with relative, with whom? This will affect about how much payout they need. And about replacement rate, the same thing. Some financial analysts talk about 70%. I don't think that it is easy to calculate a replacement rate. Before doing that, I think we have to have a study, intergenerational study, because some studies show that the millennial do not trust that when they get old, they will have assistance from the government. The millennial and the older and the baby boomer perceive differently how they will live in the old age. The millennial generation also have high aspiration, higher than the baby boomers. So I don't think I could answer what is the best replacement rate, and that will depend so much on the individual and the socio-economic and political condition and aspiration. The weakness of replacement rate is also that when people are poor, they are poor and they have to receive less than the poverty rate, they become poorer. So I think if I have to answer that, I will not worry about the replacement rate, but I have to learn more from, for Indonesia, people from across generation, what they expect to be, what they expect to have in when they are old. So we have to know about the perception itu, and this will be different from many group of people. So that is my answer. And
Yeah.
I think this is also answering the question of withdrawing the defined benefit system. Yeah, that is the weakness of defined benefit system. If we are poor, we don't have money, yeah, we don't get anything. But pension system is only part of the wider social protection system. I'm learning this from Professor Mukul Asir, social protection system. So when we talk about helping other people, we should talk more on social protection system and not limited to pension. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Aris. So actually, now it's 11:45 already, but I maybe still need 1 or 2 minutes to invite my colleagues from Fiscal Policy Agency if there is something to ask or to complete what we have explored previously. Pak Adi?
Many thanks. Saya Pak Didi ya. Okay.
Yeah.
Many thanks. In order to add the Pak Kunta's explanation and also to answer the question, Pak Farid and Bu Nia, I think this is good to know that this is the best time for us to review the existing regulatory framework about the pension. We do understand, as Pak Febrio mentioned, the most significant, important challenges is actually on the informal sector employee, which is currently comprising almost 65 million or more probably, yeah. So that's actually the main target for improving the quality of the government regulatory framework on pension. I agree with Pak Farid. Actually, in order to get the ILO standard for recovery rate 40%, an individual as a workers or as an employee, they're supposed to contribute around 10%. So 10% beginning every single date of their employment for 25 years or 30 years, then they will be able to receive 40% for the pension from their take-home pay salary after pension age. So the current problem, even in the ASN, in the government services, we only contribute 4.75% of our basic salary. So for some of the people, actually only 1% or less than 1% of its take-home pay salary every single month. So this is also the, signifies the importance on how Indonesian pension system or sector is actually need to be increased, and the opportunity is still huge. If we review on the industry, for example, current capitalization or asset accumulated for pension in Indonesia is at the amount of 5.6% only. Professor Ananta and Professor Mukul is already indicated. So this is actually the performance of the financial sector system in Indonesia, or especially in the insurance and pension, is less than 10% of its GDP. If we compare to Malaysia, for example, Malaysia currently accumulated around 60%. Chile is 70%. Australia and Canada is more than 100% actually. So if we also refer to the methodology, do we need defined contribution or defined benefit? So no matters. Every single system is really good, but the problem is on how much the potential for the society of the people in Indonesia can contribute to the system. So that's actually the effort that the government currently identify all of the regulatory framework and the necessary step to support the improvement, the performance of the pension system. Last but not least, we would like to open for the more contributive, input from the people, and because the literacy in terms of the pension is quite weak. That's why we need to push. This is kind of the transformation in the habit of the people, if the family. If you now, it happened, for example, my family, your family, currently only contributing less than 10%, that means we need to reach up to the international standard, which is 10%. If you, it happened for myself, if you already have been working for 20 years and you just only realize only contributing 1%, so this is the best time for us to increase the contribution, increase the habit to save part of your take-home base salary. And we need also to improve the system as well, because that's also the government responsibility. We need to induce the improvement, the quantum leap improvement on the system pension, the ecosystem of the system. So that's why the current discussion and webinar is quite in time, Pak Didi, and we strongly support for more inputs, and then we can work together to start the ignite the transformation in this sector, and also to improve to reach the opportunity for Indonesian becoming the advanced country, credible, but also prosperity. Affordable system is important, but sustainable is more important. As even justice, the fair enough is how to make sure our performance is in line with the government also transformation habit in terms of the literacy, in terms of the commitment, in terms of how do we manage the the risk in association of the accumulation fund in the long term. Thank you so much, Pak Didi.
Thank you, Pak Adi. As already completing the answer of the previous questions. And the additional explanation from Pak Adi, actually, what completing our discussion today. And I think because we have already 2 hours discussion, it's time to finish the today's webinar. And many thanks to speakers. All of the presentation of the sharing experience, sharing knowledge, and extend our view of how to develop the pension system, how to develop the ecosystem just and equitable and sustainable. I won't summarize the whole substance of discussion, but one sentence, if it is allowed, I will say that the pension system is the part of social protection. So we should develop it, the pension system, that just and equitable pension system based on our discussion today. So many thanks to Dr. Febio, Pak Kunto, to Professor Mukul Asher, and to Professor Aris Ananta. Can we give big applause to them? And I think we can finish our discussion today, and I will return the forum to TV. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Didi Kusnaini. Thank you for facilitating the, I would say, insightful panel discussion today. And let me conclude by thanking once again all panelists and moderator, Bapak Febrio Kacaribu, Professor Mukul Asher, who is joining us from Singapore, Professor Aris Ananta from Brunei Darussalam, and we are honored to have Bapak Kunta Nugraha, Assistant Minister of Finance for Public Expenditure, and Bapak Adi Budiarso in today's discussion. And of course, our moderator, Bapak Didi Kusnaini. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we almost reached the end of our webinar. To give a concluding remarks, we are honored to have Bapak Arif Baharudin, Assistant of Minister for Finance Services and Market Policy and Regulation. His Excellency Bapak Arif Baharudin, please, time is yours.
Terima kasih. Thank you so much for the time, and thank you so much for the speakers. I saw some names here, Pak Febrio. Thank you, Prof. Mukul Asher, and also Prof. Aris Ananta. Terima kasih juga kepada Pak Kunto Wibowo tadi yang juga sudah menyempatkan untuk menjawab beberapa pertanyaan. Thank you so much for the contribution. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, panelis, moderator, Bapak Didi Kusnaini, mohon maaf tadi lupa menyebutkan, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by thanking all of you, the panelists, participants, for the fruitful and constructive webinar. I'm confident that at the end of this webinar series, the capacities and knowledge of various parties, especially the participants dealing with the pension issues, will be even more solid. The pension system must be viewed as a whole, bearing in mind that the impact of pension reform on macroeconomic, employee welfare, and also financial deepening. Before I touch upon the topic of the pension ecosystem in Indonesia, allow me to share my perspective on the current global economic situation and the government response. Ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, the pandemic COVID-19 teach us many things. For sure, this pandemic has been destroying global life. Indonesia is not an exception. It begins as a health issue, then shift to social, economics, and then to financial issues. Today, we see over 40 million confirmed cases over the world and more than 1 million deaths worldwide, based on the data from WHO. The impact of COVID-19 to the economy becomes as worrisome as its impact to the public health. According to the World Bank, the global gross domestic product (GDP) is projected to contract by 5.2% in 2020, the deepest global recessions ever since the end of the World War II. There is no sign currently that the health and economic crisis will be over soon. Restrictive measures have repercussions effect on the social and economic aspect of life. The halt of economic activities has led to income loss and job loss, particularly in informal sectors. Furthermore, the policies taken by international communities, including the flattened infection curve measures, have a significant impact on the cessation of economic activities and cause unemployment, which in turn increase poverty and inequality. Meanwhile, the disruption of the global value chains, travel ban, commodity price drop, and the market volatility has also contributed to the economic downturn. In response to this pandemic, countries in the world have introduced numerous stimulus packages to support the struggling economies. In Indonesia, for example, we managed to save and reallocate of 695.2 trillion rupiah, or nearly 47 billion US dollar state budget to support the National Economic Recovery Program, which focus on health, social protection, business incentive, corporate financing, government programs, and also micro, small, medium enterprises. Indonesia is one of the countries that is able to reduce the mortality rate with relatively better economic performance. Indonesia shows an increasing percentage of COVID-19 cures. Data as of 20 October 2020 recorded that the cure rate for COVID-19 sufferers in Indonesia reached 79.19%. It is slightly above the world achievement rate of 69.48%. Then, until Q2 2020, Indonesia's economic growth contracted by around 5.3%, while several Southeast Asia countries contracted by around 2 digits. Besides the negative impact, COVID-19 also brings high and fast learning curve to the world. There were impossible become possible now. Therefore, I invite the world to take this moment as a window opportunity to design an adaptive and better public policy. One of them is we need to design a pension system that is not only adequate and affordable, but we have to create a sustained and robust pension system as well. A system that is strong enough in any circumstances, both social and economic shocks. Hence, the system should be approached in the long-term perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, there is a contrast quality of life between seniors in developed countries and in developing countries. Older persons in developed countries are living in a better standard of life with sophisticated facilities. Pension is seen as a reward for retirees for their contribution for economy in their young ages. Being retiree in the same time is the same time that everybody wishes. However, developed countries facing a serious financial issue related to their pension system. They face budget deficit due to increasing in number and proportion of aging, decreasing number of young generation, and pay-as-you-go implementation where pension benefits are paid by active workers. In contrast, in the developing countries, older persons live in a low quality of life. There are 80% older persons live without pension benefit. Hence, retirement is a dark period as individuals lost their chance to have a job and to generate income. The contrast condition creates an issue, how to keep high quality of life for retirees in the developed countries without harms state budget. Pension costs have more than doubled in a decade, yet revenues have only increased slightly. With limited budget, how can developing countries increase quality life for better retirees? Bapak, Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, based on the issues above, Government of Indonesia aims to construct an optimum ecosystem of pension, a system which overcomes the issue of the trade-off between improving older persons' welfare and financially sustainable pension system. Regarding that purposes, we need to understand what the future becomes. The world is experiencing aging population problems, which arise as impact of the world's success in handling baby boom problem in 1960s. It results decreasing infertility and mortality rate as well as increasing life expectancy rate today and in the future. The world's population increased from 7.3 billion in 2015 to 8.5 billion in 2030, 9.7 billion in 2050, and 11.2 billion in 2100. Globally, United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs (UNDESA) predicted growth of population of 60 plus more than double in the year of 2050, and 3 times in the year of 2100 to become 3.2 billion. UNDESA also found that the most of older persons live in the developing countries and they grow faster than developed countries experience. Population of individuals with age 60 plus years in developed countries increased by 29% within period of 2000 to 2015, which was 231 million to 299 million, while the number of the same cohort in the developing countries grew about 60% from 376 million to 602 million in the same period. UNDESA projected in 2050, 1.2 billion individuals aged 60 plus will live in developing regions. The number is equal about 80% of the total older person in the world. Indonesia does not face old population yet, such as developed countries, but the trend has shown the same direction. Indonesia potentially has aging population 35.4% from total population in year of 2100. It close to the world's proportion with 36.7%. Life expectancy rate also increased in Indonesia. People will live longer until 81.2 years old, while world rate is 83.2 years old in year 2100. The other issue, there's different characteristic between today older person and tomorrow older persons. Today older person are dominated by 1950 generation. In the past, they live in a low of living standard. Therefore, now they are less demanding because the public services provided are much better than they were young. While future older person will be dominated by 1970 generations, which experience a better living standard, more educated, and technology friendly. Hence, they demand a sophisticated public service. Furthermore, significant proportion and changing the characteristics of the person is a trade-off issue between improving older person welfare and fiscal sustainability. One hand, naturally, older persons experience decreasing of economic productivity and increasing cost of healthcare. In another hand, states have to take care intergeneration and continuing various development programs. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to suggest several key points that might be worth to consider on how to optimize the ecosystem of pension in Indonesia. First, we need an integrated person system and social protection system that can improve living conditions for the most vulnerable people and provide vital risk management tools for the whole population. Second, social protection system should be focused on developing healthy, educated, and skilled individuals. Then we will have independent and productive individuals, which mean intergeneration individuals. Three, back to our legacy as a nation. Social protection system refers to spirit of gotong royong, which the optimum role of state, family, society, and market in order to achieve welfare state. Afterward, we may run defined contribution pension system, which managed by a prudent and professional institution. With the immense experience and expertise assembled today, I'm confident that today's webinar would be able to facilitate a very constructive exchange of view and knowledge, as well as bring new insight for us. Again, terima kasih banyak. Thank you so much to everyone. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Bapak Arif Baharudin, for the concluding remarks. And ladies and gentlemen, we are in the end of our today's webinar. I would like to remind, especially for those who registered as participants, to join again tomorrow with the topic Management Pension Fund and be able to get the e-certificate after fill our questionnaire, which will share the link tomorrow. On behalf of the team, I'd like to thank you for joining this webinar via Zoom and Kemenkeu YouTube channel. Good afternoon, have a pleasant day, and stay healthy. Thank you.
Terima kasih semuanya. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Pak Arif, terima kasih Prof Aris, thank you very much Prof Asep.
Makasih. Sampai jumpa besok.
Insya Allah, terima kasih.